Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here and for joining this conversation. Um, we are all glad that you were able to make it. Haiti Beyond the Playbook, Rethinking What Works in a Fragile Context. Haiti often sits in the center of global development conversation. And this is not because people themselves care about what's happening in Haiti, but because most of the time, us as development workers, uh, the tools that we normally use while implementing our program seems to doesn't work in Haiti. And we can relate to some examples that all of you could remember. The 2010 earthquake, millions of dollars was poured into rebuilding Haiti, and yet it seems like Haiti is still in rebuilding, peacekeeping with all the various a UN mission, and still, we have 80% of the 90% of the capital controlled by gangs. So what's not working? So today, when we are looking at the needs in Haiti, it seems to be overwhelming. But people shows up, many of whom are in this room with us today. Then they shows up not because it's easy, but because they understand something that the playbook doesn't. They have pathways how to still have impact. So today in that panel, we invite you to explore three perspectives. Fonkoze, who has been working alongside women for more than 30 years to rebuild livelihood and stability. Haiti Paul Deroly is developing leaders to transform education from written. And Haiti Development Institute is working to shift how funding flows and who it reaches. These are not separate efforts. They are all interconnected. Every partner, everyone working in Haiti right now in the current context is important and is having immense impact. And these interventions, they all lead to one single question. What does it really take to work in a place where the standard playbook seems to fail? And that's what we aim to explore with our esteemed panelists today. So allow me to introduce you Karine Wollen, Nedgine Paul Deroly, and Pierre Noël. Karine earned her MD at the University of Antwerp, then participated in Rwanda for 6 years. After completing her master in public health and Antwerp in 1995, she moved to Haiti, leading multidisciplinary teams to design and implement development programs in 2009. In 2009, she became executive director of Fonkoze, leading services that help thousands of Haitian women lift their families out of poverty. Nedgine is a co-founder and CEO of Haiti Paul Deroly, an organization dedicated to improving education outcomes in rural Haiti through culturally rooted teacher development and student success. She brings extensive experience in education, workforce development, and nonprofit leadership, including roles with Achievement First, World Reach, and Partners in Health, where she supported training and system across Haiti. Originally from Haiti, I just learned that she's from Haiti, a town that I like a lot. She holds a degree from Yale and Harvard and was named both an Obama Foundation Fellow and a Cohen Green Fellow, recognized globally for her leadership and commitment to expanding equitable, high-quality education. Pierre Noël has led Haiti Development Institute for over a decade, guiding its evolution from the Haiti Fund at the Boston Foundation, into an independent nonprofit based in Haiti with a focus on strengthening its program, governance, and long-term sustainability. It brings extensive experience in nonprofit leadership and community development, including roles supporting rural education, youth, and economic development initiatives across Haiti. Born in Everett, Haiti, Pierre began his career as a lawyer in Boston before dedicating his work to advancing development and philanthropy in Haiti. Please allow me to welcome this amazing panel. So let's learn a little bit about everyone that's in the room. Don't worry, I'm not going to go around and ask everyone to introduce themselves. We don't have that time, but just do a quick poll. So who has been in Haiti in that time? Please raise your hand. That's a fair number of people. Who here is a program implementer, either in Haiti or even maybe elsewhere? I see a lot of people raise their hands. Now you know a lot of you have worked in Haiti. Some of you will, of course, part in the past. So it's glad to see all these familiar faces. Who is a founder? Thank you. And who is currently supporting programs in Haiti? So for those of you who haven't been to Haiti in the last few years, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to give you a big picture, because I know Haiti is on the news, most definitely, not for positive reason, but like we always say, life goes on in Haiti. And Karine just came from Haiti, so I'm going to let her start and just give you a big picture of what it is right now to live in Haiti, and then Nedgine could complete as well as Pierre. Please.
Okay, hello everybody. Really glad to, do you hear me? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, so really glad to see you all here. Indeed, I came from Haiti yesterday, well, the day before yesterday actually, from Les Cayes. And Les Cayes in the south is a quiet place, you travel around, as long as you don't go to Port-au-Prince, there's not an issue. What people fight with in Les Cayes is really high prices. And the government just increased the price of gas, so that made the situation a bit more complicated. But apart from that, people party, they go to the market, they have their economic activities, they send their kids to school, and they say, as long as we don't go to Port-au-Prince, there's no problem. Now, I actually live in Port-au-Prince. I was in Port-au-Prince until the end of March. I was actually in Port-au-Prince. And Port-au-Prince, it's stressful, because the place where I live, which is Ipaco, you actually hear shooting almost every day, because the police and the gangs are fighting. It's about 2 kilometers away. They're trying to get back the road to the south to be opened again. So you hear shooting all the time. You hear stories of kidnapping. But we're living. And children go to school, and we go to the supermarket, and we meet for a drink with friends, and you find joy where you can find it. And that's the way you continue working and doing what needs to be done.
Thank you, Kadeen. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nedgine. Just to add on to what you shared, Kadeen, I'm mostly in the provinces, and so 1 or 2 hours north of Port-au-Prince. And for us, I think one of the big headlines is a constant looming fear of how widely the gay activity will spread beyond Port-au-Prince. And so this marks actually a year since there was a direct attack on Yabale, which I know is a near and dear place to several of our panelists. And that's one of our 5 partner communities in the work that ASEPO Haiti does with educators and schools. And that was a direct attack, which literally led thousands of people having to flee their home within minutes with nothing in hand, no preparation of any sort. And so I do think there's a looming threat of what will take place if this violence is not stopped, if there's not a direct dismantling of gangs. It's not enough to stop the flow of weapons into the country, but what is it to address the systemic issues and the underlying issues that have normalized the spread of violence? And so along those lines, I think one of the things that's been most important and inspiring about these last couple of years has been Haitians' rejection of a new normal, right? So whether it's the increase of prices, the 2-digit inflation for the last 3 to 4 years, there is rejection that this should be normalized and that we should accept that this will just be a chronic, ongoing crisis.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Just happy to be here with you and also to share thoughts with co-panelists here. Some of you have been sitting here, so it's great to be here. Really, on my hand, I flew here from Boston, but last week I left. I was in Haiti. Just want to reflect a little bit on specifically on the Artibonite Valley. I'm from the Artibonite Valley, Haiti's breadbasket, the largest, potentially most productive part of the country. And having the fact that I grew up there on a farm with my grandparents, I understand the potential. And today, as we speak, because of what we're dealing with, there are large portions of the valley that are not being blended or in production at all because the gangs have moved people away from Villa at Petite Rivière, a vast portion of the valley. And you understand this quite well from your days in HRS. That's very hard to comprehend, that you have a government that is sitting idly by looking at further reducing our capacity to produce. Haiti currently only produces, well, prior to this, we were producing just 40% of what the country needs. So today, as this continues to grow, you can see where we're headed. Especially if you're looking at this continuing to grow in areas outside of a metropolitan area. So for me, this is with respect to the impact that this is having on livelihoods and impacting the state that people have in their communities or in the lives around them.
Thank you, Pierre. Last time I was in Haiti was about 1.5 years, and I went to have meetings with my colleagues, Tarine and Dominique. I moved permanently to the US in 2020. So I worked in Haiti, I lived there, I grew up there. And when I left to come to the US, from living in the US and connecting with the news, it feels like it's totally chaos down there. And me that grew up in Haiti, no, I could not imagine myself, that's where I was with my wife and kids, taking my family back there. In 2020, I left and we came back as a family in 2022. And I was surprised to see that, two things. First, among a hallucinogens and the gang that is controlling the capital, or prince and everything, that communities have found ways to secure themselves if the flow of kidnapping have went down from, it's not that it's not happening, but it's definitely not the way that it used to be. It's because community have secured themselves to that movement called Wakale. As well, I was afraid that, with all that violence, that what I call the Asian spirit will just disappear, because it's been a decade that, we have had like multiple crises before, but that's one seems to be looming and staying, and every time you think that it cannot get worse, it get worse. I was thinking that there will be that state of a depression and not being connected to life. But I had that experience. There was that marketplace that I used to go and get my fruits and everything. And in Haiti, we call them pratique, those little women entrepreneurs that sell on the street. They have not seen me for 2 years. And as I was driving with money in my pocket just to give them, and they came and give me like, the biggest hugs, and they say, we have not seen you. And they prepare a big basket of foods, of vegetable, and say, this is for you. And I say, well, listen, I'm not living here anymore. I don't want it. They say, no, please take it. I know you can get money. This is our gift to you, but tomorrow, please come back and spend your money. So that, to me, really shows that, as Karine, Pierre, and Nedgine is saying, yes, there is a lot of violence in the situation. It's complicated, but life goes on. And what they don't tell you in the headlines is that when you're looking at the violence and the protests and the gangs, but always pay attention on what's happening on the street. You will see a little Martian that is wrapping up his stuff very quickly. So these are the ones that, we are trying to help and support, because more than ever, they need our presence. So with that said, we're ready to kick off the panel. Everyone's ready? So what's happening on the ground? The first question goes to Karine. What does poverty alleviation actually looks like day to day for the woman Fonkoze works with?
So when you ask me that question, what I think of a woman called La Villa. La Villa I met her like a couple of years ago on the island of La Bonave. I was visiting a group of women that had just been recruited for our Ultra Pro program at Fonkoze. And we came into, this is a really isolated rural place, red earth, a lot of dust. And we came into this place where there was a shack made of planks. And a woman was sitting there. And when we came into her courtyard, she was sitting like this, not talking up, not looking at us. When we asked questions, she was murmuring a response. And she had these two little girls, they must have been like 3 and 5, sitting on her lap listlessly. And then I went back 2 years after. And the woman stood up, welcomed us, said, come and see what I've done. She had built herself a new little house. She was so proud of the donkey she had been able to buy, which is important in La Bonave because people sometimes have to walk very far to go get water. So with her donkey, she could get more water. The girls were playing around, roughhousing, and she was so enthusiastic about her plans to build a new rainwater collection system. So there's many different ways of fighting poverty. And the problem of poverty is so big that you need all these different approaches that can build something together. Fonkoze's way is to take a woman by the hands, really give her intensive coaching, support, walk with her for 18 months, for 2 years, and really cause this transformation, help her to gain back control of her life, to be able to put food on the table, live in a house that is secure, send the kids to school, and realize her dreams. That's Fonkoze's way. And together with others, it really creates a dynamic in a community.
Thank you so much. I can build a little on that because my journey with Fonkoze didn't really start 3 years ago. As Pierre said, I met Pierre the Artibonite. At the time, I was younger and smarter as I was working as a doctor in public health. And I used to run a nutrition program. And we were doing a UTF, clump peanut, treating extremely malnourished kids. But one thing that I realized is that maybe 6 or 7 months after, these women, they will come back to my work. And I realized that, most of them actually knew how to balance a diet. They just could not afford it. And we connected them with the Fonkoze financial branch that was in Ponsonde. And I remember very clearly they received some training, and it was 3 women that started a little business of selling soap. I've never seen them in my world again. Since after that, I went to work for other organizations, the CDC, and every year they used to send me a picture of their business or and other women that they have trained. I think I've stopped receiving these pictures just because my phone number changed. So that's, what I think is important. And with that, Nedgine, education is also something that is very important. Not only training someone, the family, but restoring that person's dignity through education. So, Nedgine, how does the impact of culturally rooted programming show up in practice, especially in this crisis?
Thank you for that question. So I am grateful for this question about culturally rooted programming because it allows me to celebrate our earliest beginnings at Enseignement pour Haiti. And so when many of us came together and said, as educators, as activists, as those who are fighting for equity and liberation, how do we contribute? Because at the end of the day, about 15 years ago, the idea was not to start a nonprofit or an organization, but just to join forces with other freedom fighters. And we took 3 to 4 years to just listen. We literally said, can we listen to the genius, to the intelligence, to those who have been in the trenches and pushing for a different type of livelihood and well-being? And over those 3 to 4 years, the answers that came back to me were especially linked to this one key question. We asked, how are we at our best? Not what's broken, not what needs to be fixed, not what do you need, but when are we as a people at our best? And the responses that came back to us created the foundation on which Enseignement pour Haiti sits about 15 years later. Because what came back to us were we are at our best, we are most powerful when we tap into our culture, our customs, and our community norms. They now are known as the 3 C's of Enseignement pour Haiti, but it was really the elders, retired teachers, grandparents, and even parents who came together in the hundreds to give that response. And so fast forward about 15 years, at Enseignement pour Haiti, we've realized that the culture, the customs, and the community norms of our identity as Haitians must be reintegrated into how education takes place. This probably comes as no surprise to many of you. Over the last few decades, those things have been stripped intentionally from how schools function and how teaching and learning take place. And so when we re-Haitianize, as we call it, we re-Haitianize the education system, we've seen incredible gains academically, socially, but especially when it comes to civic leadership, right? Because we believe the classroom is a microcosm of what the entire society can look like when done well. And so I would say the 3 things when it comes to culturally responsive programming. The first is an asset-based approach, right? There are so many assets. There are so many learnings that can take place when you tap into the strengths of the Haitian people and our norms and our traditions. The second piece is really paying attention to those who are often overlooked, right? So in our work, we call it proximate leadership. Like, how can you get closest to the people who've experienced inequity? Because as an incredible activist, Glenn Martin says, those closest to the problem are closest to the solution, right? The mothers, the teachers, the students who've experienced inequity, if you get closest to them, they're the ones who must be at the table, not informed, but at the table when decision-making takes place in order to shift systems, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, whether it's other things. And then the last thing I'll mention is a learning posture. I struggle a bit with those who come in with all the best intentions, but a little bit with the savior complex, a little bit with the savior mentality, the quick fixes. And so what we've said at Haiti, which is deep in Haitian culture, is can we sit, listen, and learn? Can we sit at the foot of those, whether it's Maksha and market women, whether it is educators, parents, who have lived this experience and who can help inform us on how best to proceed alongside them. And so I think a lot of the hallmarks of culturally rooted practice for us are steeped in deep respect for the dignity of everyone. In Creole, we say, tout monde c'est monde, everyone is a person. Respect the dignity of everyone, and also love. I mean, I think sometimes you think of it as like this amorphous thing, but rooting our work in a love of people and a love of assets beyond circumstance is what has paved the way for us to be successful in education.
Thank you so much for that answer, Nedgine. My career has taken me in different path. And a little bit after the earthquake, I started to work on an organization called Artists for Peace and Justice. And we were supporting an education program. The Academy for Peace and Justice was, at the time, the biggest high school that was providing education to kids that was coming from the slums, specifically from Cité Soleil. And the Artists Institute was the only a cinema, a audio engineering school in Jacmel. And what Jane is just referring to, you know, I've witnessed it with my two eyes. So it takes someone that come from the community where the problem is rooted and you empower them, then you'll be surprised that, you know, they're already thinking about how to address that solution and culture. You know, so many times growing up in Haiti with parents that, you know, call them intellectual, they were saying, well, your artist, like, culture is, that's not going to pay the bill. But it's really what is guiding, you know, our, the life and what we are talking about, you know, our culture build communities with so many attributes. So Pierre, what distinguishes organizations that endure in Haiti from those that struggle?
You know, so much of what has been said here, I think, distinguishes those organizations that have that actually can thrive in Haiti. For Karim's point regarding uplifting la violence, humanity and dignity, and creating that opportunity, creating the pathway for that to happen. And also with Nedgine's harnessing culture, listening, really listening, and c'est pas seulement attendre, mais c'est pas tellement écouter, mais attendre. But really, I think at the end of the day, what we really want to see in organizations that are supporting development across Haiti is, whose development is it? How is that defined? Is it defined from a board, at the boardroom simply? How is the lives of those it wants to support injected in its objectives, its strategy, and so forth? So if you can't do that, then you can't make commitments. And the commitments then would be not to the people you want to serve, but to just those key points that came from a few folks with PhDs and masters. And I have one, so it's not about but the key is, all of us here, and I also want to say I want to thank all of you who are here, who are committed to Haiti, because I know a good number of you in this room have years of work in different spheres across Haiti. It's how do we take that and bring it together, all of our learning, and we can bring them into our organizations. With HDI, we started with identifying gaps. We realized there was a big gap in getting funding to Haitian organizations, Haitian hands, and local rural communities, because most foundations were actually giving funding to large organizations, the usual suspects, those who speak English, those who speak French. And the fact is, Haiti is one of the most socially disenfranchised and inequitable. I mean, our social inequities are off the hook. And they have been there from the beginning. So if you want to work in support lives of people in rural communities, those who are really disenfranchised, you can't do it through those who can't understand and see those people specifically. So we wanted to make sure that funds were getting to these organizations. And the other gap that we also saw that was capacity building. Yes, a lot of people were saying these Haitian organizations were not at the level where they could receive certain amounts. And when we did our study, we realized, yes, that's the case. But it's also the same case in Boston. Because there are organizations that the Boston Foundation wouldn't give money to simply because they couldn't meet that threshold. So it wasn't so different. And we're not a special case. Our capacity building program started in Boston. So we have been creating those, looking at bridging those gaps. And for the past 15 years, we've gotten funding about $5.3 million to across 330 grants, but all of them to local organizations who otherwise would not have. And along the way, we grew their capacity. And I can share more examples of how some of them have grown over the years and now are directly working with ING, with large foundations and also multilateral organizations. But the key is, at the heart of every organization, it's whose commitment are you of looking to uplift, and how are you committing to those lives? Martin Luther King said once, one of the worst things you can do is build a society where the people living in it have no stake in it. Right now, you could say a lot of that is what you're living in today in Haiti, because you have young people joining up with gangs in their communities. What's their stake in that community? Did we work with them to make sure that they have a stake? Every single one of them have a stake in their community. Because if you do have a stake in your community, you'll protect it, you will build it, you'll spend in it. In fact, you'll do everything to ensure that it thrives. So that's what I would take that is a common thread in every good organization. It's ensuring that all resources are supporting that children and families in those communities can thrive.
Thank you for that, Pierre. It is so true. There's a word that, when we're referring to Haiti, that you often see, I would say, in the development vocabularies, that Haitians are resilient. That's a word that, I don't like. And, Pierre kind of pointed to that. Resiliency means that, we're meant to suffer. But that's not it. I had a friend that used to live in an area called Criswa. And one day, we had a call where I was talking with her. And within the call, I started hearing gunshots. And I told him what's happening. He said, well, the gangs are attacking. And I have to drop the call because I'm going to resist. That's a word that, I liked better. It's not resilience, it's resisting, it's fighting away. And that's what each of these organizations that we have here today and others that I've seen representative in the room, that's what we are trying to give the people. We are trying to give them back, to resist, to fight back. With that, I went back to Niger. Enseigner pour Haiti develop Haitian leadership and education by working with local civic leaders to decolonize education and transform Haiti's education system. What does effective leadership look like on the ground right now to achieve this?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. So to your point about decolonizing, as I mentioned earlier, this is really about re-Haitianizing and tapping into the solutions and assets that already exist within our DNA and within our culture. In terms of effective leadership, I would start with the importance of having a learning organization and a learning posture. I think there's been a lot of well-intentioned efforts that haven't learned from the mistakes of the past. I'll give you an example, even outside of education. A lot of people understood the importance of hunger and the bread basket going dry or not being invested in. And so many years ago, Haiti was flooded with imported rice. Good intent. It destroyed the local rice economy, right? And so imagine those of us in Haiti who experienced what that did, hearing later that they're importing peanuts now. So again, the posture of saying, how can we be of service? How can we co-identify with locals the solutions? For me, I think it first has to come from a leadership posture of listening and learning. For us as educators, we had to sit and understand why it's important for education to not only be about the academics. Everything I mentioned before about culturally rooted programming has tripled our students' results. Instead of about 30% of them passing on grade level and on time, on average, we have 90% of them now passing. But it wasn't only because of focusing on math, reading, science, as important as they were. We had to listen from our elders and retired teachers who said, help them understand who they are first. What is their identity? What is their history? And embed that in every subject. I'm telling you now, math is better when you include it with song and dance. Reading is better when you include it with history, proverbs, and hands-on activities. And we learn that from our Haitian culture. So for me, it first is about learning, and learning especially from critical feedback. Community members who come and show you what is maybe not going well, they want you to succeed, right? They're not looking to attack or antagonize. The other thing I would say is co-creating with sustainability in mind. That's what we're here in Effective Leadership has been these last few years in particular. For example, focusing on programming, not projects, right? This short term, let me do this for 6 months, 1 year, 2 years is not helpful. But when you sit alongside community members to say what programming over 5, 10, 15, 20 years can shift the trajectory of children and families, livelihoods, well-being, that's really what effective leadership has been looking like these last few years, co-creating with sustainability in mind. And sometimes when you have sustainability in mind, it means cutting out the fat. Let me say it that way. For us at Unsafe YET, we said we're going to invest so deeply and scale deeply in communities without a media budget. Media matters, right? It's important to increase the visibility of your work online, in person, publicity, ads. But guess what? Taking away those extra elements, nice to haves, allowed us to actually build credibility and trust by word of mouth. And that actually accelerated the reach and the ripple effects of what Unsafe YET was built to do from the very beginning. The last thing I'll say about effective leadership is moral courage. So in this day and age, and I think everyone in the room will know what I mean when I say this current US administration out of the United States, when it has repeatedly dehumanized Haitian people, It led to many decisions that forced organizations to say, let me wipe my website, let me clean the language I use to not be attracted or perceived as a threat by those who have access to funding and power. Right? And so if you're tied to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, if you're talking about liberation and justice, will that make me more of a target? At UCYET, we stood 10 toes down and said, we're going to lean in more deeply. We're going to speak more unapologetically about this type of work, and it will attract the right partners. Not everyone is the right partner for us. But if you understand that we've always been about liberation, for me, speaking unapologetically to your core values is what leadership looks like, including saying we've always done education programming, but what about the mental health of our students and our teachers and our parents, right? Moral courage also says this matters as well. Can I tap into local psychologists and social workers who will make sure that our people are well as well as succeeding academically?
Thank you, Eugene. Yeah, I think that that last part, the role of leadership, it's very important. As every time you tune in to get news about Haiti, you are not going to see something positive. I remember that the day that Haiti got qualified for the World Cup, it felt like the nation just one moment was united. I was in DC and my phone started to ring, and I was on a WhatsApp with people in Paris, people in the street of Port-au-Prince that was celebrating, people in New York, people in Miami, and it felt good. It felt powerful. And, and that's what, we want for Haiti. Karine, I'm going to you. Related to progress being disrupted, you have recently made the difficult decision to close Fonkoze's internationally recognized health store program, Boutique Santé. When do you know it's time to let go of a program?
At the heart of Fonkoze, there is the Timachan, the women traders who are all over Haiti and who form the backbone of its economic situation. So at Fonkoze, many, many years ago, 2012, we decided to set up what was supposed to be a social business. Thinking long-term, like you were saying, not short-term little projects, but thinking long-term with systems you put in place to actually address the social problem. And so the idea was to help the leaders amongst the women become health resources in their communities. So we were buying products, health and hygiene related products in Port-au-Prince, and we shipped them all over the country to these women who bought the product from us, sold it on in their communities, and at the same time they were getting training on nutrition, on hygiene, on health, and spreading that in their communities. Identifying children who were suffering from malnutrition. At the height of the program, we had over 1,000 of these women screening 100,000 kids over 1 year. So they were so proud of their work and of their contribution to their community. But then, of course, the gangs got there, roads got closed, suppliers, we went out of business one after the other. And these days, to move goods out of Port-au-Prince into the provinces, you have to pay the gangs. And we said, we're not going there. So we just couldn't maintain the operation. We had to close it down. And that's where I agree with you, Nedgine. At that time, the basic thing is you have to learn. You have to learn and listen. So we went back to the Timachan, who are also members of my board, and we said, okay, do we have to stay involved with the health sector, or do we refocus on livelihoods? And they said, health is more important than ever, because this whole crisis in Haiti actually destroyed quite a bit of the capacity of the health institutions who are there. So we said, okay, you tell us we have to do something about health. let's think. Let's put our thinking caps on, learn from what happened with Boutique Santé, and build something new. And I must say, we're very excited these days. We're designing a new health program, but that learned from Boutique Santé, from our first one. So we're not going to go for a lot of goods have to travel from one place to another. We're going locally with local, really roots-based people, with nurses in their community. And we're looking at a franchise model that will actually help these nurses who live in their community deliver really quality primary health care in their communities. That's another mistake we made with our first one, with a business model in our mind from the very beginning. You know, we have the spreadsheets and the projections, and it's going to change. You know, that's the way it is. You have to be agile and you have to be able to adapt. But from the very beginning, you need a solid business model so that you can actually grow and get to scale and really bring a solution to the community.
Thank you, Karim. As a health professional myself, you know, I can definitely relate to you when you say that, you know, that situation destroy the capacity of the health intervention in Haiti. You know, we've seen in Mirbalais, the biggest hospital, you know, closed down, and that's so sad. You know, we needed more of this type of institution, not one being closed. And talking about like public health, Haiti is a country that's it's mountainous. We have that saying, there are more than others. So, which means mountain beyond mountain. So it's hard sometimes to get to the people and primary health care. It's basic, but you will not think that because of all of those difficulties that it's very difficult for people to access. So going into the communities and giving them the capacity to be able to have that solution, it's very powerful. So this is a program also that I'm excited about. You know, I'm looking at Karim developing it, and we hope that, you know, it's going to be successful. Pierre, as a funder, intermediary, you sit between donors and implementers. What are the biggest misalignment between programming and funding structures?
The funding landscape, I think, in Haiti has for so long been misaligned and supporting specifically projects. I grew up with my grandparents, so there's this thing they usually say, "Shemelewe gomboti." It means you have to make commitments. And if you're making if the commitments that you're making are just for a project or two, we do not lead our lives according to projects or 2 to 3 years. So it's the ability to make commitments that hasn't been there. And also, there's not been the simplicity that is required. And by simplicity, I'm not saying downplaying the capacity of organizations, but once you read a major proposition, and I'm speaking mostly of the multi-million-dollar investments, not the 50 or 100,000. But you look at the RFPs and the way that they are designed, it's hard for local organizations because it's already prescribed as to what is going to be funded and who is going to be funded. So what is needed to get more, I think, impact we tend to seek impact, but to get to impact, we have to really build a bit more simplicity in the process so that it's more accessible to local organizations. And also, what we're measuring, oftentimes the spending is measured as opposed to outcome and impact. But what is available, because I think even as they are we're facing challenges, I think we're also at a very critical point. There's been this is an exciting moment because I think there are a number of organizations in the past 15 to 20 years, like HDI, Haiti Community Foundation, and others, who have actually done a lot of work supporting local organizations. And at this point now, there's opportunity to invest directly in Haitian communities because they have the capacity, Haitian organizations now have the capacity to actually take large funding and invest the right way. And by that, I also mean capacity is there as organizations, but also leadership has been. The leadership quality, I think, has increased as well. Work that's being done with NCA for Haiti, HDI, we invest quite a lot in developing local capacity at the leadership level so that you have organizations that are led well, because governance is key. Good governance, good leadership to me are key, but also institutions. The other thing I think that's missing also with respect to funding, the funding structures, is that there's not been enough investments in infrastructure and institutions. We worked with a partner in the South, for example, and we helped build their capacity. They are now a fledgling organization with pretty much every system that they have is in place. The other thing is their community needed irrigation after a study that took 2 years. Irrigation was the key problem in that community. We invested $60,000 and helped them build the irrigation canal about 1,200 meters. That has changed, and that our accompaniment, that has changed their production from producing 2 metric tons of rice per hectare to now they're producing 5 metric tons of rice. Now imagine, for example, we have $100 million and $25 million that are just going into the hands of people in the next 6 months in Haiti right now. Imagine we were investing that in infrastructure. Imagine we were investing that in schools and other things. That would create jobs. So for me, it's how can we turn the system upon its head so that it's investing more directly in it as it follows the needs that have been identified by the community members themselves. And this is one of the reasons why when we work with organizations, we are there for the long term. We may come in with a program for the first 2 years, but we're there, you remain our partners. And some of our partners today started with $10,000 with us. Today they're managing infrastructures worth $1.5 million. That's, to me, is what we need to do, because the funding structures that are currently, as they currently exist, especially with bilaterals that are investing large amounts of money, too much of it is going to the usual suspects in Port-au-Prince or nowadays OCAP, and not much of it is going into rural communities where the needs have been defined by local leaders, local communities themselves who have made commitments to themselves and to their communities over time. The other thing is in the word, the idea of infrastructure institutions. When you have institutions, they carry the norms, the values, and so much of our lives as opposed to individuals. Individuals, you can build individual capacity, but it goes with people. And as individuals, people, we travel, we immigrate like I did. We have to also, at the same time, look at the institutions we're building, invest in those. And in each community, to me, we could look at that. Like, for example, if you have in education, you would have an education, community education center like that, like it's being built in Central Plateau. If you replicate that everywhere, ensure that every child has access to to science labs, access to IT labs, and it's centrally managed by trusted organizations, as opposed to us oftentimes trying to invest in all the myriads of schools that are ill-equipped to manage all these labs, and then in 2 years we don't see them happening. So to me, how do we centralize certain things through institutions that can actually sustain them?
Thank you, Pierre. We are very close to the end. We have 30 more minutes, so I have one question that you're not going to circulate, maybe two questions that are going to circulate to the panel, and then we will open for the audience to ask a question. So these two questions are, let's start with the first one. If you could redesign one core aspect of how international fundings flow into Haiti, what would it be? We'll start with Ring, and we'll go to Nedgine and Pierre. Very quick.
Maybe the worst is that this has been documented again and again. Best practices in terms of funding organizations. They say three things: multi-year, flexible, and building institutional capacity, taking into account the core funding you need to actually build an organization. I think if you could make sure that all the donors actually respect these three principles, it would already go a very long way into, like you said, building things that will actually last past just one project, just 1 year.
Agreed. I would add to that, in the last few years, I've noticed sometimes that there's like an over-indexing for innovation, whatever that means these days. Everything has to be innovative. Everything has to be different. And I think there's some tried and true practices, including things that are people-centered, that should be the focus of investments. I love how everyone's smiling because you understood what I meant. And so I would say having more of an emphasis on impact instead of innovation. And why not even define equity as impact? Mm-hmm. What would it take for deeply equitable systems to exist and be funded in order to institutionalize best practices as opposed to chasing a new ball every 2 years?
Yeah.
One thing I would say would help is, I've been doing this work for 21 years now in Haiti. And from what I have seen, there's a lot that we've done that should be scaled. And investments at this point now, I think we should try to do a lot more coalition so that we can scale the things where we've been successful at. One, for example, I can give you one example of that's happening now. When we started for 10 years, we were doing intermediary grant making, capacity building. We've worked with about 200 organizations and their leaders, and then convening. convening Haiti funders conferences, agricultural conferences, and so forth. That's great, but we also, over the 15 years, understand that we've done so much, we can scale on them, and there are so many other people around us who've done a lot. How can we bring these coalitions together? So we've created coalitions. The Collectif Acadien, for example, is a coalition of 15 organizations led by HDI as the anchor. But the work is about integrated community development. And the community had chosen as the anchor project, the Agri-Food Entrepreneurship Center, which is about to work to support 25,000 people. So the key is there's a lot that can be done, but by bringing, creating coalitions and anchoring them and building scale, where we have found success.
Thank you. The last question that I will circulate around you, very quickly, with the new landscape of fundraising, there's one key thing that you find from donors all the time. It's it's too risky for investing in Haiti. But yet, we just demonstrate that, with our partners here, that, there's actually quick work happening. So my question would be, how should funders think about risk? How can we as implementers, help them understand what we are going through on the ground?
So, there's many risks. Sometimes I hear organizations, colleagues in Haiti say, oh, we carry all the risks and then the people abroad don't. But that's of course not true. Just working in Haiti carries a certain level of reputational risk if you don't manage your stuff well. So I think the key thing is dialogue, is talking about it together, identifying the risks and being very clear about who carries what portion of what risk and how can we work together again to mitigate these risks.
Agreed, Faline. I think the thing I would add as well is let's make sure we define what risk means. I think some of the risks, it's part of this narrative that is being propelled about Haitians in Haiti that I think we need to dissect. Because some of it is deep in xenophobia, deep in racism, deep in inequitable understandings of how injustice has come to be. And a lot of these things were designed to operate inequitably. And so the push I would have for those who are considering if it's too risky is speak to your peers. There are people who have leaned in so beautifully, many of you who are in the room, who said we will lean even more deeply in these troubled times, because we know what systemically has been started and what the momentum can look like if we continue to do so. And then on top of that, be part of the counter narrative about Mighty Haiti. I think you started about media and the headlines. We don't have enough, I think, in terms of the energy that is putting out a different message about the good work, the mighty work that Haiti has done before, and the new revolution that's currently taking place that I think will influence the hemisphere.
What I would add is sometimes funders actually contribute the way they contribute and to with whom the partnerships they build, I think, contribute to the risk. You can't always fund the same folks and assume that everything should be fine. But to that, I would add, we also need to, the one way we could share the risk is by bringing it to the fold different types of funding. We have to, I think there should be a movement, or maybe we're at this point where a movement is building for blended finance to be more effective in Haiti, so that we can move from grants to investment. At HDI, some of the organizations that we used to make grants to today, we're making loans to, we're investing in, because we've worked with them, build capacity enough so that they're actually generating revenues through the services that they provide to their communities. So to me, that's also a way for us to actually share or diminish and mitigate the risk that exists in Haiti. And also, we got to look at how funders can actually partner up so that there could be a sharing as well in terms of mitigating the risk and investments.
Thank you, Pierre. Thank you, Perry, and thank you, Nedgine. So with that, I'm going to open up for question and comment. Uh,
My name is Serena Cruz. I run a charity called the Global Searcher Umbrella. And I was very excited to come today, and I'm sorry I was late. Sorry, am I here, right? Okay, sorry. Whoops. One of the members that I have in my organization is a general surgeon in Port-au-Prince, Leila Mangara. And I promised her that I would come today because one of the things that we're trying to do within global surgery as a movement is identify diaspora bonds, ways to work on diaspora bonds to scale access to safe, timely, affordable surgical care in very fragile contexts. And so I was really interested in Pierre's last point. Whether people believe healthcare should be free or not is a different topic. But for us, with providers and physicians themselves working in Haiti or Somalia or remote parts of Indonesia, the Amazon, like this is what we work on the hardest to reach locations. So I was very interested to talk more about and learn more about diaspora bonds. That HDI is doing that. If you know much more about that topic, I'd be really interested to hear from you. Thank you.
The Haitian diaspora is the key to livelihood today and has been for a long time. There are a number of attempts in terms of catalyzing resources from the diaspora into Haiti in a more structured way beyond remittances. There's some of these pieces at work. On our end, we're currently working on, we're not doing diaspora bonds at the moment, but we're working and building partnerships so that we can, one, create a better leadership in local government. This is the first time we're actually looking at, instead of just supporting civil society, who have to themselves then interact with local government in their communities, we should also build capacity across at both levels. So we just launched a program for a certificate program in partnership with South African University for local government and public service, creating a different type of public service in aid so that we can increase governance and capacity at that level. Two, we're also working now with a partner, and this is still just in the works, so it's not yet official, is creating opportunities for local leaders to be successful also by creating opportunity and a way for diaspora eventually, but not yet, but for investments to be made for at the municipal level through municipal development fund. So imagine today someone makes a call, $1 goes to Haiti Development Fund, or if you invest, if you make a transfer. There's $1.50 that goes to a Haiti Development Fund for education. Imagine if we get to a point where you could actually make a donation of $1, but to your city, and that the mayor of that city or community, the community will then get to define how that money gets spent. So this is where we are at this. It's still being developed. We just put someone on to work on this, but we're partnering with 3 cities, and also we're partnering with sister cities of America, and to see how that would work as well. But eventually, we want to get, once the structure is in place, then the diaspora would have the opportunity to actually make investments directly through those funds and support development in their community directly.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Craig Jaggers. I'm in Plan with Purpose. First of all, thank you for a very rich panel. Appreciate it very much this morning. Gary, you mentioned something I'd be curious to maybe unpack a little bit more, particularly for all of us in the room who are invested in seeing human and environmental flourishing in Haiti. How do we continue to draw those connections between ourselves? You mentioned a good kind of funding umbrella to make that happen. But I think to Nedgine's point, really, I love your emphasis around culturally responsive approaches. And for many of us who are committed to that type of approach, how do we continue to influence that groundswell when we're not always connected, right? What are some ways that we can be building those connections amongst ourselves so we don't just operate in silos? And maybe, beyond just kind of some funding umbrellas or ways that we could do that together in a coordinated way, how would you see, particularly in this context, that we could do a better job of doing that and working in partnership, especially given some of the challenges of the governor's inability to deliver some of those things? So there's kind of this groundswell of support together. How do we do that better? Thank you.
I love that phrase, the groundswell of support together. I love that. Translate, please. Kumbits. I mean, it's kumbits. There's a lot in our culture that comes together for collective action. One of the things that I would support, and I think I've benefited from a couple of times, I'd love to see it flourish more, is space for learning together. I think we're always kind of rushing to show that we can implement, that we can act, so that we can put something together quickly and then quickly also show the impact. But the space where we can come together and say, here are the 5 learnings of the last fiscal year. Do you have some in common? Do you have different ones? What error did you make that I do not need to reproduce because you're already sharing with me some of the pitfalls to avoid? And so it'd be really interesting to have a groundswell of funders and practitioners learn vulnerably, honestly, candidly together. Because the other challenge is when you're afraid to share the mistake, when you're afraid to share the misstep, and then none of us benefit because you have to be seen as perfect and everything is all put together. And so that's some of the things that I think is a coalition approach to learning that I would share. And of course, emphasizing what I think you and I already see eye to eye is it has to be embedded in the culture of the local context.
What I would add is the importance of helping your partners in Haiti connect. Because actually, there's many local organizations, but there's very few platforms where these local organizations could come together and candidly amongst themselves share mistakes, difficulties, challenges, successes, but again, amongst themselves. And Clio is a network of Haitian and international NGOs and organizations. And they're actually currently building a working group where only national NGOs, national organizations are accepted. And I think supporting that kind of initiatives, telling your partners, yes, it is important that you participate in local networks so that we as local organizations can actually build our own voice. Because all too often, when we get the opportunity to influence policy or to interact with others, we either represent our own organization or the space is taken over by international NGOs. So building strong networks of local organizations, I think, is important.
I would add to this, and as a convener, HDI creates that space, but my ask is if we could get more resources for convening. When we make a grant to your local organization, one of the things that we often try to get them to do is to put $1,000 or two so that they can participate in things. When they get, it's hard sometimes when you invite an organization and they cannot come. And oftentimes we come in and support that, but at the end of the day, they're as partners to them. If you could ask, are you putting funding for your operation, for the internet? Are you putting funding to travel? Because oftentimes travel is not a line item that they tend to. And then the other thing is being convening themselves is important. For example, it's great, Clio is great, but also because Clio is such a high-level organization, that space oftentimes is not for them, simply because we also talked about the social inequities that exist. Clio would speak French or English oftentimes, and that is not for local rural organizations. Our commitment had always been for local rural organizations and decentralization. So if you are making a grant to local organization, it's great if to build that network capacity. It's great to also put some funding towards that.
Thank you. We would love for that conversation to continue. Unfortunately, we're going to have to close the Q&A. And we have been working on something at Fonkoze that, I want to share with you before we close the session. But I think that just a couple of minutes. Thank you for listening. Annual report will come out soon. We have some of our old annual report to grab and stories on the field. Thank you to Piano Well, thank you to Nedgine, thank you to Karin, and thank you for everyone that came here to listen to our panelists. And I want to end with to end saying that what's important is that all the work that you have been hearing each of these partners are doing is that it's not, they are interconnected. Each of these partners, they are important. We need education, we need Fonkoze, we need HDI to be in these communities to provide these services and to provide this guidance. And that's the only way that, we will be able to resist and fight back and find our way. Thank you so much.
So,